and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Welcome, adventurer. Dylan here, and on today's podcast, I have Travis Deverell, aka Shirtaloon. He started to discover that writing an internet story about an interdimensional kung fu wizard had somehow become a marketable skill when he accidentally found himself to be a successful author. He's now quietly getting on with it while hoping that no one notices the entire thing is ridiculous. Under the pen name Shirtaloon, he is releasing several books in the ongoing He Who Fights with Monsters series. And so without any delay, I'd like to welcome Travis.
G'day.
Hey, welcome,
Hey,
brother. Doing great, man. I am so excited to have you on the podcast, man. You're one of my bedtime books. You know, those like books that you listen as you fall asleep and you just kind of let it quietly go in your subconscious.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. So great job on the series and great job on continuing to kick out the content, man. You have a unique knack of somehow continuing to produce content online with this written web series. And I'd love to like first find out just a bit about like, how did you accidentally stumble into writing about an interdimensional kung fu wizard?
Okay, so I went back to university, so in my mid-30s, and because I was just going through a series of dead-end jobs, and I always had a passion for writing, so I went back to university. Did a lot of creative writing stuff, some media studies, and I got really caught up in that. So I ended up starting on some postgraduate work. And while doing that, you kind of realized that not a huge fan of doing research. And I am a big fan of writing ridiculous stories on the internet. And yeah, just had a revelation that, no, I really am not happy writing this research paper about cross-generational masculinities in a post-colonial Australia. And I really wanted to write a story about a guy with magic kung fu powers. So I sat down and so started writing that. And I just started putting it up on the internet for free. And, I'd always hoped that I'd be able to, make a little money off it. Then I kind of made a lot of money off it, which, worked out very nicely.
Yeah.
Just never expected the kind of success that I ended up having.
It's a great book series. I mean, someone who's like, I eat like literal RPG books for breakfast, lunch, and dinner kind of thing. And I just somehow stumbled across it on Audible. And when I did, I was like, wow, there's some very good writing in there. And that I can cross-section that with not only on the social level, but on the spiritual level, on the world building levels, the magic, like there's a lot of different areas in it that is very well fleshed out. How did you get so good at writing? Was there anything that like really kind of allowed you to kind of find your rhythm and find your pace to become to make such a well-rounded book?
I don't think there's any big secret to getting better at writing other than, lots of reading and lots of writing. It's like anything else, you get better at it. Like I did a lot because I wrote this coming out of university. And one of the great things about working with sort of large writing groups that I had the chance to while I was there is that you can just write a short story and give it to 30 people. And then 30 people will give you like a huge stack of sort of edited, heavily noted manuscripts. And that is fantastic for improving your craft. So writing groups are amazing. And I got to work with a local award-winning author, Danielle Wood, who's fantastic. And I learned a lot from her. So, but before I started this series, like obviously I'd read goodly chunks of LitRPG myself, but I come I came to it more through the serialization space, which is those online stories.
Mm.
Um, and there's no gatekeeping there. It's incredibly open, which is fantastic for opportunities. But it also means um, there's sort of no quality threshold, and that's great for a lot of things because it's a great space for hobby writers who are never trying to get a career out of it. They just want to write the stories and put them out there for people, and that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, going into that space, I sort of worked on this story beforehand, like the world building and the system and all that sort of thing. Sort of came first before I ever started knocking out chapters. Also, there is a first version of Volume One, which is like the first 3 books. It's really short. It is breathtakingly terrible. Like just aggressively bad. Because at that point, I'd never completed a long form story. So I was kind of obsessed with finishing. So I finished what eventually became, I think, 257 chapters in 66 chapters. And that shortchanges everything from story to plot to character. And the whole thing just screamed desperate to get to the end. So once I was finished, that went right out the window, and I rewrote the whole thing from scratch. And that's
Did you publish it?
No. That one's staying in the drawer.
So you got to do a rough pass in the official, first pass on it, and then you realize that, I mean, really, giving it the time, giving it the attention to allow for character development, plot development, power development, progression systems, things like that. It seems like it takes, because it is a well-rounded, and there's a lot of nuances. And what I'm really trying to understand is, like, when you do this world building, when you do these kind of creations of this, the book 1, 2, 3, and all that stuff, how do you actually world build? Are you drawing on like napkins? Do you have whiteboards? How do you, because it's a hard magic system, and like, can you talk to me just a little bit about how you actually build these worlds?
Okay, so the magic system is probably the oldest part of the story, because with LitRPG, especially because that is where not only are you doing a hard magic system, generally you also have to show your work like it's a math assignment. In fact, some of them kind of read like a math assignment, but it means that if you make slip-ups, continuity errors, people are going to notice and they are going to call you on it. So the system for me sort of came first. Mine's not number heavy. It's more concept heavy. But I started off with a very, very sort of different system and refined it, because this is something I've wanted to do, just knocking around the back of my head for a lot of years. So while I was in university, I just sort of, if I was going to do this, what kind of system would I do? And I just refined it and refined it and refined it. And I had a system that I really loved. And, when I sat down and started looking at how it works narratively, I realized it was completely and utterly unworkable. Because I built this huge, like complicated, intricate, heavily synergized system where the first book would have no plot development because it would be all explaining how the whole thing works. And that's when I had sort of my big revelation, which is like, when you're making a lit RPG, you're not making a game. Like, your system isn't something you're meant to build a game off. It's a narrative tool that feels like a game. And that's when I started like simplifying and paring it down and getting to the point where the system served the story instead of building a story to serve the system. But how that sort of relates to world building is, once I sort of had my system in place, then it just becomes about questions. So you take a world and you go, okay, well, this thing is true about my magic system. What does that mean? And that's how I essentially did all my world bidding. I just go through and what are the ramifications of this? What are the ramifications of this? And it just keeps having knock-on effects as you keep answering questions until suddenly you've got a world that feels well, hopefully, sort of rich and integrated and cohesive.
Yeah, yours definitely does. I mean, and also the progression systems, the way that people gain their powers. I'm going to do my absolute best to have no spoilers this entire conversation. And I will, and if I feel one coming out, I will scream it out as fast as possible and have everybody do earmuffs to cover it up.
Mhm.
But the the way that people gain their powers and the way that they're unique to themselves and the way that they kind of choose their own path, like a choose your own power system, and the way that it progresses and it has a tiered progression system, it feels very robust, very natural and all that, but also tracking of that system. So again, going back to it, you said you refined it, into something that is a narrative tool and not a game mechanic. And being someone who is I build games and
Mm.
that's what I do, I understand that the complexities of those things that happen and the fact that people love to hack the system. As soon as you
Yeah.
try to build something, people go, but what if I did this, this, and this? And they immediately try to break your system in half, which the more details you give them, the more pieces they can grab onto. And
Yeah.
so with you, how did you, again, not have someone
Yeah.
call you on fudging the math homework that you're turning in?
Yeah.
Like, do you draw boxes inside things to map these things out? When you say refining the system, what does that actually look like for you?
Um, I use Word. Like I'm not a big spreadsheet guy, so I've got piles and piles and piles of just documents of you know this is what this does. This is what this does. It's not super efficient, but it's quite comprehensive.
Cool.
Um, but yeah, no, it's eventually because those questions you talk about, people are going, "What about this and this and this?" Um, yeah, people love doing that with my story modeling. Yeah, it's a huge part of my Discord community.
Yeah.
They build up around people going, okay, what if you have this power and this power and this power and yeah, but yeah, for me it's just piles and piles of documents.
Got it. So then you have your own kind of almanac of how your own Dungeons and Dragons guide, kind of, or He Who Fights Monsters guide.
Yeah.
That makes sense, and it's very curious because, like, in my own mind, people that are able to, this narrative world that you crafted is so thoughtful. There's so much to it and so much complexity. I think people want to call it out because it now feels like it's a part of their world. There's something where you tell such a good narrative story that people like it. It becomes tangible and real to them. It no longer becomes words on a page. It becomes a living, breathing thing where you start to relate to these characters. You start to find these types of connections with these characters where you almost feel for them and you feel for moments in time that they have. Jason, the main character of the story, for people that don't know, I find to be very likable and very relatable for a variety of reasons. But I'd love to know, like, how do you go to, like, what is your process for like making those characters and like, say, Jason, and how much of him is you versus other characteristics? Like, I'm very curious to understand that.
um yeah, so when I'm doing like character outlines,
Hmm.
what I tend to start with is um, where does the character come from and what do they want, and sort of everything just sort of grows out from there. And this isn't lit RPG specific, obviously. Like every author wants to have people connect with their characters, well, unless they're really really horrifying characters. But um, yeah, and that's just sort of where I start. Like I get asked how much of me is in Jason or Jason is in me, quite a lot. And in a lot of ways, Jason's starting point is sort of me, like 15 years ago. There's a lot of naivety there, like a lot of sort of political passion,
Hmm.
but in a very sort of untested principle kind of way. Because that's sort of this is something I wanted to explore a lot, which is the idea of he comes from a safe, happy, relatively affluent background, so he has a lot of sort of liberal principles, but he's never been sort of forced to stand up for them or try and protect them. So he gets put into situations where now that he does, and how well do those principles hold up? How well does his moral stance manage to endure what he goes through?
Yeah. And there's something to the character of this defiant nature when he shouldn't be, and while also cracking jokes along the way. And even though there's some of the jokes I get and I relate, being a millennial child of the 80s kind of thing, and but there's also some I don't, because I'm not region specific to you. So there's some crossover, but there's a you're talking about who he is and what he wants, but there's also this balance in the characteristics of having this incredibly willful and dominable spirit, and there's cockiness and also loving of barbecues, and this kind of dynamic mixture of character, which is a really weird eclectic thing to kind of bundle together that makes him a very well-rounded character. Can you talk to me a little bit about the formation of that, and like, is it necessary for him to have those traits to really be the hero of the story, or?
I think it is. A lot of those elements, the loving airwolf, and the barbecues, and the being inappropriate in various situations, that anti-authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Though a lot of those are the aspects that sort of come from just me and sort of a general Australian attitude. Because there's because I come from convict stock, so there's that sort of strong, screw the British kind of old school Ned Kelly kind of feel to how I grew up, and a lot of the sensibilities I came up with. But and I think that is important for Jason as a character. And a lot of it is just pure defense mechanism. Like, it's he gets thrown into another world and he feels completely lost. So it's one of the ways he protects himself is just by trying to make everyone else feel as confused as he is. Even if that's trying to explain the Karate Kid to a wizard. With no context whatsoever, just so they're looking at him with no idea what's going on, and that's an important part of who he is and how he operates.
Does that ever blend into real life? Where
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I've never explained the Karate Kid to a wizard, but I have tried to explain LitRPG to my Aunt Helen, which feels about the same.
Could you just real quick, for people that don't actually understand Lit RPG, could you explain a little bit about it, the genre?
No worries.
Yeah.
So Lit RPG is sort of a hybrid genre, because it can fall within different genres. It's usually fantasy, but it can be science fiction, steampunk, whatever, where video game elements are explicitly placed into a game. Now, there's a couple of terms there. There's game lit, which is sort of video game elements within the story, which may be even visible to the reader or not. So, like your Ready Player One, that sort of thing. Whereas Lit RPG is a bit more specific. It works off generally progression fantasy, except the progression is what you'd see in a video game. There are levels, there are stats, and you actually get to see those as a reader on the page, or read out in an audiobook.
Yeah,
so you usually gain levels or skills or whatever. Most of them have levels. My particular system doesn't. It has effectively skill progression, but there's explicit hard video game elements, like literal screens popping up in front of people and leveling up and all that sort of thing from video games.
It just feels a lot like, uh, if I don't know why, but it's almost like I'm having this own personal experience of watching some person go through the most epic VR Twitch of all time. And you get to hear about his journeys and his missions and things like that as we go through and learn it. There's something that's very, very desirable. That's more desirable than a normal fantasy fiction novel, as a literal RPG, where you're hearing this game-like experience of the window screens popping up and reaching into their inventory and then collecting jewels and points along the way, and they have a looting skills and abilities, and there's all this stuff in it that makes you feel like you're in the most epic D&D style experience that's gamified, and you can, and it's so well built out that like it I don't know, it just feels very much more immersive. And it's, yeah, and then it's also, there's so many life human elements that you have on it, right? From like the social layer to like the spiritual layer to like the game layer. It all kind of integrates to itself.
Yeah, well, it hybridizes, what everyone gets out of reading a book
Mhm.
with what people can get out of a let's play, for example. So,
A what play?
a let's play,
What's it?
like a Twitch streamer or whatever. People just
Oh
watching
yeah,
a stream
yeah,
up,
yeah.
just go through a game. Um, and then you just take in all the things that make books amazing and you put them together, and so you get that sort of much more rich, personal experience. So it's like the enjoyment you get for watching someone go through a game, but then the stakes are higher, the insight is greater. You have characters to cheer um, and hate.
There's both sides, right? You find you create very likable characters, but also ones that you hate, which are, there's certain characters that come in and out of the game, and they in the game in the book, wow. And so but you're going in and out of that. But if you look at those things, yeah, you have both sides. You have very likable main characters, and there always seems to be this still of very powerful assholes in your
Yeah.
books, right? There's these people that are progressively more intense, but also more heartless. But one of the characteristics that Jason has is he humanizes everybody and everything and everyone and makes everybody equal, which is a very unique thing, but I also think very, very powerful. Can you speak a little bit to that? Like what makes characters good versus evil, and things that you try to do that make people likable or not likable in terms of developing a world building experience?
I mean, Jason himself is far from a perfect character. He has a lot of flaws, and there are a lot of people who get turned off the series by the main character. Like on Royal Road, I don't have a lot of middle of the road reviews. There's like lots of "I love the balls off of this," and then there's lots of "I hate this guy so much. This is the thing."
Okay.
Which I personally find great. I'd rather have people be passionate one way or the other than like, it's fine. But and I think that is about just making choice of the character. So if I want, um, someone to be evil, it's about finding what makes them terrible and why that works. Like. Um, a lot of my sort of earlier antagonistic characters are like Jason, not great at what they do. Like they're driven by really unsavory appetites or desires, and they're not especially terrific at sort of managing themselves, and that's just part of their character. Like if someone is working with a mindset that's quite depraved, they don't tend to be ideal at operating in society at large.
Yeah.
And and that's why it comes back to what I was saying earlier about finding where they're from and finding what they want, and then just expanding everything from there.
Yeah. Yeah, the social dynamics that you build into your game is fantastic. Your game, I keep saying a game. It's gonna be stuck in my head this way. But the social dynamics that you build in there, the building of the characters, the Gellers and the different types of social political moves, right? The looking at the way that there's the relationship that bonds these characters that kind of form their parties and they get together. There's a lot of very well made socially informed kind of decisions where you can tell that there's different characters at different social levels. And I find it amazing just your ability to be able to kind of craft those narratives around each of these different characters and think through the plot points of what drives them, what engages them, what characters like, what would cause Rufus Remore to reach the pinnacle of, being driven for certain causes. Again, trying to avoid any spoiler alerts along this path here, but there's certain things that you do of being able to create those systems. And I think, do you have things written up in terms of the principles of what the characters stand for or things like that? Because I noticed that like there's certain like Jason has certain rules that he lives by and he has certain principles that he stands by, and these things come to face him. They come to test him again and again, and then you kind of uncover these the way that they operate in the reality along the path. Like, I'm just curious, like how you track that, how you do that again. It's just more of the world building process I'm fascinated by.
Yeah, I mean, it's just some basic character outlines. Like I say, I start with that core concept, and then as I develop the characters, it is much the same way I work with world building, which is I just take my start point, and then I start asking questions. So, I just look at what a character wants and where they're from, and then start asking, okay, well, how are they going to get that? What have they done to get there? How far are they willing to compromise to get that thing? And questions lead to questions and lead to questions, and you ask enough questions, and that leads to story, and it just sort of expands out naturally until everything just sort of fits together.
You it's so funny because your writing's so good and you make it sound so simple. You just ask questions and the story reveals itself. Pop up. Which is really funny to me because I'm trying to understand it, because being someone who has to narratively build these experiences in games, it's fun for me to wrap my head around. One thing I'm impressed by what you do is your ability to continuously put out content on the Royal Road, and your ability to continuously, like, it's so amazing. It's one of those things that like I forget about for a little bit of time, and then I look back, I'm like, oh wow, 4 more chapters. That's crazy. And then like, and how do you like not build yourself into a corner as you're writing each? Because usually you put a whole book together and then you look at the book, you do like, oh, whoops, can't do that, and you kind of go backwards and forth. So like as you're constantly putting out this content, how do you continue to make more content like linearly going through the experience without actually getting trapped along the way?
Outlining matters. Every author approaches outlining in sort of a spectrum from they sit down with no idea what they're about to write to by the time they actually sit down to write, they've probably got at least a solid third of the stuff out there, just because of how rigidly they've planned everything out. I fall, I think, closer to the work as I go kind of end of the spectrum, but outlining is also really critical, because I like to give myself the flexibility to move around and have an idea and explore this sort of concept. And that's where doing the world building first really, really helps, because when you're coming across to something, it's like, oh, there's a thing from my world building that would be really great to explore right at this moment.
Oh.
So it's about knowing the stuff is there, so that when you bump into it, you can sort of explore that, rather than inventing your world as you go. But I think of it like a roadmap. Like I'm on a path, and I can wander off the path to just explore what's around. But as long as I have my roadmap, I can get back on the road and head back in the direction I'm going, because it's going to be probably a 12-book series, unless something goes wobbly. And I have it plotted out all the way through, but that's like, yeah, but that's also, in fairly broad strokes, because I do like to give myself that flexibility to move around and to change my plans.
Wow. So looking at that, when you're talking about a 12-book series, and right now you're at book 3, about to release book 4.
But
Right.
I'm actually just coming to the end of where I'm actually writing is the end of book 8. So
Oh, yeah, because the online The Royal Road, you have book 8. Well, you have all the
mm,
chapters laid out. They're not necessarily sliced up. They're just a bunch of
yeah,
chapters shoved together online, which is a fantastic thing. It's funny, like, there was what happens is, I think when you find like the easiest form of the content, and then you fall in love with the content, and then you'll switch to more difficult forms of content along the way. So I'm
yeah,
a I'm a big anime fan. So way back in the day, I watched all the Tsunami, like Naruto style things, and then that
mhm,
ran out. So then I got into like the Japanese version without the English dubs, and then that ran out. So then I got into like the online mangas, and just
mhm.
you start to go through that. And what happened with your books is I did the Audible. I went through the Audibles all the way in, and then I told my friend about it, and he's like, oh, by the way, if you go to Royal Road, you can actually read all of his stuff. I hate to read. I love to listen. I hate to read. And I'm like, you can't make me do it, man. So I got a little trick for myself, and I don't know if anybody else does this, but I'll share it with you. With one of the things I do is with the Royal Road, I can copy it and I can drop it into a thing called Speechify. It's an app, and I just have it read to me. So I have all of your chapters like that, and I'm just like listening to it as a robot reads it to me. Because I just refuse. I refuse to read words on a page. You can't make me read. But it's an amazing series, even going into that. But that's why, like, I was even going through the online, because I'm up to date on, was it like 550? Was it 556 or something like that? What's it?
Something like that, because
Yeah.
the Patreon's like 20 chapters ahead. So
Oh, is it? Okay. So I'm gonna go sign up for the Patreon so I can get 20 chapters ahead of this one and just go all the way through it. But I use the Speechify app so it gets read to me. It's not as good because I'll toggle between that and the Audible ones, and I'll
because
go in between.
Heath does a fantastic job.
It's great. It's fantastic. I can feel the characters. It's very it's a good combination. When you find a really good writer and a really good narrator, it's a wonderful match. So I highly encourage it. It's just that you ran out of road, man. So I had to get my fix somehow. And I was like, I hit the thing. I was like, well, I'm not gonna read this. I guess I'm just gonna use this other.
Well, I could tell Heathy, that you want him to record faster, but I think he might throw something at me.
It was pretty quick though, because you just fairly recently, didn't you? Book 3, was that, how long ago was that you released that?
September. Yeah, book 1 was March. So,
Ye-
so book 4 will be the 4th one for the year.
Wow, see, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, a little over 9 months.
Yeah, because what happened was I was on vacation right before September hit, and I ate book 1, book 2, and then I thought, oh, September, this comes down. I went and I ate that up, and I was like, oh, I'm all out of content. And I went on the thing. So I will absolutely get the next book as it gets released. I was just like, how do you not get tied? How do you not tie yourself down and get into a cul-de-sac of your own mental landscape? And it sounds like, so you have an outline of where you want to go all the way up to book 12. At the same time, you have the
Yeah,
magic system and all the other systems in some sort of giant wizard-like compendium bound
yeah,
together with human skin. And that thing's off to the side. And you have both those things. You're looking at, okay, that's my outline of where I'm going, right? You're like, this is my outline where I'm going. And then you go, okay, this is my rules of the road. And then it kind of allows you to kind of weave through there. And so you can continue to build out the world and continue to lay the details to the outline. Is that kind of how it goes?
yeah. So having my system all sorted out and having my sort of outline, so I know where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
Those are sort of the key things that let me produce 5 chapters a week.
Mm.
Um, because it takes off a lot of the narrative load and lets me just, okay, now it's time to sit down and write the thing that comes next, not sit down and think, okay, what comes next and how is that going to work?
Got it.
um, it sort of it lets me have, I guess, sort of a purely, narrative experience writing, and it makes it a really good job.
That's it's amazing to hear the process because I can see the output, or at least I can hear the output, and it's really an enjoyable experience. Is there any other like do you have plans to write another story besides He Who Fights with Monsters? Are there other ones that you have in the back burner that like, oh, I can't like?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Because I spent a lot of time like setting up my world building and all that stuff before I ever, and even doing that sort of first draft that shall forever remain locked away in the drawer.
Uh,
Um,
Come
Before
on.
I ever sat down and wrote this, and so now I'm sort of starting that process again. I've got 4 more books in Here Fights with Monsters. Once I've polished off book 8, and so I'm now sort of working on starting all of this process over again for what comes next. And
Mm.
and I'm basically working on 2 things at once. I haven't decided which one I'm going to go with um, yet, but because I really love both ideas. But I'll probably just do a one-shot story, just sort of as a palate cleanser, just like a one book. I don't know, maybe superheroes or something.
Okay.
And then I'll sort of launch myself into another series.
Got it. Oh yeah, yeah, a little ginger palate cleanser to kind of get ready for the next phase. That makes sense. It's funny because these the when you craft these narrative worlds and they're so depth and so rich, you want to consume, at least as a reader consumer, you want to consume more and more of it. So, but for you feel maybe a bit tied down, a bit like I feel like okay, I don't want to have to write 12 books and 1,000, probably 900 chapters to get through the whole thing. You kind of want to be able to kind of boom, get something done and kind of get in that. Does that help you with your creative inspiration, or how do you get inspired? Are there other authors that you look up to? How does that whole inspiration piece for you work?
Um, yeah, so I tend to obsess on one thing at a time, which helps doing this kind of thing. Like when I get into something, anything at all, like board games. If you look behind me, that's just all board games.
Wow.
When I get into a thing, I go all in. Um, so I think the key for me was finding something that I was really excited to write, something that had the depth that I could just dig in and just keep going and going and going,
Mm.
and then just completely go all in, because that's sort of me in my element. I know there are a lot of writers who sort of work in my field, lit RPG, serialization or not, who will be working on multiple stories at a time. Yeah, that's not me at all. In terms of inspiration, um, yeah, I don't know. It's lots of different little aspects. Like dialogue is a very heavy part of my writing style, and a lot of that comes less from books than say television, where dialogue is king. So that sort of rapid fire, Aaron Sorkin, Joss Whedon banter. I think the inspirations there should be fairly clear in the way I write.
The
Um,
banter is so fun. The pop cultural references, the chucking things back and forth, the play on words. It feels very friendly and it feels very down. It feels like you want to go get a drink with the characters as they all hang out, like in some post battle bar or so, place where you could all hang out together and have drinks. There's something to the banter that feels very relatable. Even though a lot of the characters don't, because they're from other worlds, don't actually understand what the hell the main character is talking about
yeah,
half the time. There's like this inside joke where I feel like I'm on the inside because I know some of these pop cultural night ridery references as you
yeah,
go through everything. Is that intentional? That thing
yeah.
that yeah.
It's absolutely intentional. Um, Plus, it's always fun if someone go Jim Carter. I've heard of that. That's terrible. But sometimes they get very obscure. Like I wrote a chapter the other day where they're talking about the Wikipedia page for Ray Fiennes.
What?
Yeah.
I don't know that one, man.
The actor Ray Fiennes.
Wait, let's look him up. I'm gonna
He
look him
played
up.
Voldemort.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. Now I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But
What a random character.
yeah, but actually, that downtime. I've talked about this a lot with other authors who work in serialization, the sort of producing all this content online at a rapid pace, and that sort of downtime is kind of like the secret sauce for this kind of writing. Like for me, that downtime, like characters hanging out, just having fun, even if it's just like them talking while they're on the way to fight the giant evil thing, is more the heart and soul of the story for me than actually seeing them fight the giant evil thing.
I completely agree. And as you say it, like as much as I love hearing about, there's something about the progression of like, wow, he got a new power. Oh, he evolved to this thing. Oh, wow, new racial ability or whatever, insert thing, which is very cool. I don't know why it's cool because I know they're just words. You're just making up points and chucking points at things. And I go, oh, more points. I don't know why. Like I still like that third grade gold star. Yeah. But that bantery, shit talky, like poking people, having them poke you back, pulling out a plate of biscuits. There's this combination of like that makes you find is there an importance, like because you place around like barbecues and inviting friends to Barbies, and then all these like people just getting these like, hey guys, let's just have a good time. Like there is it because you love barbecues, or is it you understand that is really the time that you really connect with the characters and the development stuff?
And that's what it is. I mean, because these stories are very much escapist stories. So it's actually very important for me, sort of thematically, that it does feel like fun and joyous a lot of the time. Like, but also, there's also the fact that you can take that away. Like in my in sort of, especially around the sort of book 5-6 area, which will be coming out next year. There's I don't want to go into spoilers here, but
it's okay. It's totally fine. No one's listening. You'll be okay.
But things become a bit more sort of emotionally stark. There's more of a feeling of isolation and those things that have been solidifying that the fun thing. So their absence takes a very sort of visible toll. And where I'm at writing now is sort of bringing that stuff back in. So
kind of like how Stella got a groove back kind of thing.
That's very much like that.
Well, you have what you're talking about is there's this almost this like cycle of, you're talking about joy and then struggles and then acceptance and triumph. It's very much this hero's journey narrative of people going, almost being broken into pieces and then reforming and coming back whole or coming back better and gaining powers. But then also you have that emotional toil that happens as they go through and they try these things. And you're like, oh, by the way, they're not just a player in the game. Like there is some psychological damage that has happened as they've been basically putting through the ringer. And they may have come out stronger, but they also come out more fragile, or they come out more sensitive. And there needs to be this reintegration period of not only is that struggle, but then there's that breath of fresh air when there is a reuniting, when there is the joyous period. So it seems like, is there a part of the hero's journey kind of philosophy written into that, or how do you look at character arcs and progressions are you following those types of paths, or what does it look like for
Yeah,
you?
yeah, it is. It is sort of very much because it's a long series.
Hmm.
Like, um, I could write just a whole lot of stuff where it's all just fun and bantery and fighting some monsters and getting some extra hit points or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't want to write 12 books of that.
Yeah.
So I want to throw my character into some holes. I want
Mm.
him to go through stuff. I want him to learn. I want him to regress. And and character growth is what keeps me as a writer and hopefully the readers engaged throughout what is quite a lengthy series.
Mm. Do you, do you have an emotional connection to the characters that you've made up and have written down? Are there like, do you have, I'm just curious with like the relationship, because I feel by a listener listening to the book series, I feel a relationship to each one of the characters that you have in there. Where I almost feel like I know what they would say in this situation. I know what they would do. I feel like, oh, it'd be so funny to put Clive in this weird situation
Yeah,
where you have to it's all carnal and physical, and he's like, what am I doing here kind of situation, or what, whatever, but you can see how they would probably react. Do you feel a relationship with these characters even though they've come from within, or how is it for you being both the dungeon master in
yeah.
this narrative book series?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there has to be an
Hmm.
emotional connection there. A writer, when I was in university, I mentioned working with a writer once. Something she told me, I don't know where she got it from, but said that like if you can't make yourself cry while you're writing, you'll never make your reader cry.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Huh.
so that
Yeah.
that emotional connection has to be real, like, and it has to be affecting, or you're not going to have so the kind of depth and connection um, that you for your readers if you can't have it yourself.
Mm.
And and even in a ridiculous story about magic powers and Team Knight Rider, um, there still has to be a real core to each of the characters,
Hmm.
or it's just fluff that's going to wash over. If you want there to be a connection, there has to be a realness in that.
Yeah. It does there is a realness to it, and the development of each of the characters and the struggles and the lessons that they learn along the way. It's a very well rounded, like the character development as new character members come on and they form the team Biscuit or whatnot as they go
Yeah,
through. That each one of them has their own developmental arcs, and they go through and they learn to open up in ways that maybe they haven't, or accept certain things that they don't. So I love the richness of the character development. And you're talking about if you can't make yourself cry while writing, you'll never make your readers cry, which I think is a really important thing for young writers or world builders to note. What that makes me think about, is there any advice or guidance you would give to young narrative writers writing this genre, or other people trying to build worlds, lessons learned, if you could go back in time and give it a young Shirtaloon advice or guidance on this, what would that be?
yeah. There's a few things because I do get because when you work in a serialized space, there's sort of an expectation of audience engagement and availability to the readership, which is part of building a successful readership.
Mm.
Because it's very different from approaching from different avenues of publishing, where each one has its own sort of marketing tools and ways of building an audience. And in serialization, it starts in comment sections and being in Discord channels and being available to the author. So and I get lots of questions from people because, as I mentioned, there's no sort of gatekeepers. Anyone can jump in. So this is a question that I actually get a lot, like to the point where I have a PDF somewhere. It's about sort of 2 pages long on sort of everything that I've learned about sort of launching a serialized story and finding success.
Oh.
And and I've learned a lot from other readers, other authors who've done the same thing. But there's a few things, like for LitRPG specifically, I talked about how I've refined my system, and it started off way too complicated. Making things as simple as possible in terms of how your system works is important, because you need to view it, as I said, as a narrative tool, and so that it serves the story rather than the story serving it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think one of the mistakes a lot of people can make in approaching this sort of story is making it all about the system and not all about the characters.
That is one thing I've noticed. Is it's a wonderfully well built environmentals, but the character development is very rich and it's very well thought out, and there's a lot of thoughts behind it, like, and not only that what the characters are, but how the characters operate in this world. Like, what is a soul? What are the rules with interacting with souls? What is how does that relate to the person's principles and morals moving through the system? So
because one of the key things I want to do, because we're talking about the magic system and sort of building your own magic system for each character.
Mm-hmm.
And my ultimate goal with the magic system, like the core thing I wanted each character's powers to be a reflection of who they are. So my character Humphrey is a very sort of rigid, straightforward, upstanding person, and all his powers are very straightforward as well. They're simple, they're plain, they're effective. There's no hidden tricks there. Whereas, I've got a character, Belinda, who's a thief, where her abilities are, tricky and versatile. And then you look at my protagonist, Jason, and he's got sort of the most complex interaction with his abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Because they like he's this guy coming in, and he's trying to do his best to be a good guy, but all his powers are evil. like 4 E's evil. It's like draining blood and darkness and sin, and sort of exploring how his powers evolve as we sort of dig into sort of the meaning of that. Is explicitly tied to his character development.
Yeah, which is also tied to the how his how he not only is his character, but what you would say is you could almost personify his character as his soul, and how his soul or his essence is reflected in a lot of the things that he does, and in a non-spoilerty kind of way. There's a lot of things that you talk about on how the character is affected by the powers, and how the powers are affected by the characters, and how that is reflected and seen in the ways that there's a very transparency going on, where you can actually look at it and go, wow, there's a lot of depth to him. And there's, like, if you only knew the surface level things, you'd think one thing, but it's kind of like peeling those things back. You can see the depth of his character and the turmoil that he has, having to do these things while trying to keep these morals, like that, does the ends justify the means? And there's all that kind of I think exploration going as the character kind of discovers himself and what he stands for and what he will do and what he won't do and what he learns from the motions of time, which I think is brilliant. Question for you, slightly a side note, but I want to know, Shirtaloon, how'd you get that? Where'd that come from? Like, I don't really know what to do when I say that. I feel like I'm saying some sort of.
I always get this question, and
sorry, man, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I always get this question, and it's not an exciting story.
Okay.
I mean, it's just an internet handle I used to use, because I used to go use like Pantaloon, because it's just fun.
Yeah.
When I was like using it as a handle for games and whatnot. But I kept, signing up to games, and I'd go, okay, Pantaloon. Well, that's taken. Crap. Shirtaloon. And and if that was taken, which didn't happen often, but it did, then it's like Cravataloon. It's like, and if that's taken, it's like, no, that's it. I'm not playing this game. But it just like I kept sort of going to that second one so much that it ended up just being what I used all the time. And then when it came to release this story, when you're doing serialization, almost everyone uses a handle in the sort of Royal Road space rather than an actual one. And I like that because it does tell you something about the tone of the story. Because the title is a Nietzsche quote, which is like super serious. So having the author name being nice and silly, I think shows you the juxtaposition of the tone. Because one of the big things that I do with my writing style is I like to use that isekai, that sort of guy thrown into a fantasy world thing, to play around with tone and clash tone and culture. Because one of my sort of central ideas, like very, very early in the process, was that idea of, what happens when an Australian yobbo meets Gandalf. and that is a sort of a tone. Obviously I didn't use Gandalf, and my character isn't really a yobbo, but that is what I wanted to explore. That was one of my sort of very early starting points.
It adds a lot of flavor to the character, him to have these powers and these capabilities, along with this kind of quirkiness of like, and also it's not only just true quirkiness, it's this combination of false bravado and things that he throws out there, as well being well over his head in so many situations, and then walking away going, oh, I made that one. Wow. And like, there's this combination of that, but like then so you can kind of see that there's a crack in the veneer, which makes him more human of an experience, and you really feel for him, and you feel for the losses, and you feel for the wins, and you feel for him trying to put a front on, and then the shit talking amongst his crew of people, and they just kind of like, they embrace him for who he is. And there's a lot of embracing of the characters and embracing of the things, and they are very dynamic, like Belinda, and like the depth of her character is a very weird character type. And I'm like, how did you get all these power sets, and how did you work these things together, and how to, like, this would be like the worst person to try to like pin down because of like. And so I think it's very interesting how you have this super serious, you're right, he who fights with monsters and conquer the world kind of thing, with just the sheer shit talking. Is there anything, like, with everything that you built and everything you're doing with this, and you're talking about this 12 book series, and then somehow this marketable skill of becoming a internet writer, which is, to me, does not do justice of what you create. But from making all this, is there like a holy grail for you? Is there like an end game? Is there something that, after doing all of this writing and all of this obsession and all of these late nights, sleeping in a hammock as you knock down hours and hours of the written word, is there an end goal for you, or some sort of holy grail you're hoping to achieve with all this world building?
Not really, because just becoming a full-time writer was essentially the end goal, and it happened startlingly quickly once I actually sort of, it's that thing where you come out of nowhere after working very, very hard, invisibly for a few years, because I was working on this story for about 2 years before I ever started releasing it.
Oh wow.
So that's between that first draft and doing all the world building, like it was it started off sort of playing around while I was in university, and then after I came out of university, I just sat down and went, right, I'm doing this thing. And that was all very intense, but once I actually got there, like the success I had was startlingly quick. And like any success, there's a huge luck component involved. So, for example, like I got a major reviewer on Royal Road who's like well known for telling stories, for reviewing stories, gave my story a positive review, and that sort of sat there at the top of the review ranking charts. So my story was effectively sitting at the top of one of the charts on the front page, which pulls in huge amounts of readers, even though it wasn't me that got to the top of that list. But that sort of level of prominence brought me in new readers, and then it sort of ballooned from there. So I got quite lucky in the speed with which it happened. But actually getting here is kind of my end game. I'm, doing something that I absolutely love the balls off for a living. And if you can't look at that and go, that's a win, then what the hell are you doing with your life?
It might just be the American in me that's like, come on, don't you want more? Don't you want to conquer the planet? No, like there's a. I mean, so you've made it.
Yeah, I'm happy to explore new projects and go new directions and exercise new creative muscles. But yeah, no, I'm from my perspective, I'm kind of sitting on the mountaintop.
Well, it's a great series, and it's one of those things that like, well, I look and I go, wow. Knowing that I'm like, how much did this dude have to write to make this book this good? That's really what I look at it. I go, there's a lot of to me when I see it, I realize that the work that went into before making this, because people look and go, oh, overnight success, and you're like, well, years and years and years of writing, and then flip a switch, and yes, and
yeah,
so
I wasn't even working before this came out, so I'm here in Australia, and I was actually unemployed as I was sort of full-time getting ready to start this off. So I was terrified that this wouldn't work out at all. Like I was absolutely terrified.
Do you have a specific memory when you thought that you might be in over your head?
Yeah. Yeah, because when I'm, talking to like the job network agency, and it's like, yes, we know, you're writing your book. That's all very adorable. We need you to get a menial job, please. Fortunately, there's more of a social safety net for unemployment here in Australia than the US. So one of the things you can actually do is, you can be unemployed and take the time to sort of properly build something up. Like you can use that safety net to take the time to build a business or whatever you happen to do. In my case, it was writing a book. It's not. It's like just enough to live on. Like my friends and family really helped me out there so much.
That's so cool.
But and this that increasing push to go ahead and get a job. So I ended up going on this job interview for a call center, like an inbound call center for a power company, I think it was. And this was 2 days. Sorry, no, it was just a few days. It was the week before my Patreon was about to launch, which was how I first started making money at this. So I ended up having to go to this job interview a few days before I find out if any of this is going to work. So I'm anxious that, like, okay, is this going to work? If I just spent like the last, year and a half, 2 years working towards this only to have it like flop massively. So I'm terrified at this stage. And I ended up having to go to this job interview because it's like, if, you get a job interview and they say no, and you just say, no, I'm not going to that, they cut off your benefits. So, all of a sudden, I can't make rent or eat food, which is bad.
Yeah.
So I go to this interview for this job. I don't particularly, because if I get this job, then I have to stop writing. I won't have time to, produce 5 chapters a week. Right as my Patreon launches, and the whole thing collapses in a heap. But I don't, like, when it came time where I have to accept this job, I wouldn't know if it was going to work out or not. So I totally phoned in this interview. It was like a group interview and an extended thing with, one-on-one stuff as well. And I just completely phoned it in. I was like, super chill, just talking about whatever the whole time. And they loved it. Turns out when you're not super nervous and invested about getting a thing and you come off more relaxed, you seem super confident.
It's like he doesn't even care.
Yeah. So they offered me this job.
Oh no.
And the point is like, okay, to accept this job, because I would have had to quit this job like 2 days in if this thing had if the Patreon had taken off. But actually, because my work history was sketchy, my last reference fell through because they moved on without everything else. So I was like, unfortunately, we're going to have to, withdraw the job offer. And I'm like, oh no. I'm like, ugh. Okay, but now I really, really, really need this writing thing to work. Because when I first started, I was like, I set myself a couple of goals with like some extra work involved. So it's like, this will get me like halfway to completely off unemployment, and this will get me to fully off unemployment. I was like, and I set some goals. So I was like, hopefully within say 2 months, I'll be able to, live off writing. Not super well, but I'll get there. And that took a day and a half. So all of a sudden, not only have, I just had this whole thing. I mean, I was over the moon at that point. Like at that point, I'm like, is this really happening? Like, that this seems, to be going too well. Where's the trapdoor I'm standing on? But then like, because I'd set that sort of extra work goals, all of a sudden, I'm doing twice as much work in terms of just writing as I'd been previously to sort of catch up to the goals I'd set, on top of all the things I was now learning that I would have to do that I didn't know about when I sort of transitioned into doing this. So there's the extra work that sort of soaks up time.
Wow.
Because I talked about, Discords and comment sections, and audience engagement is a huge part of what I do. You have to build your community, and of loyal readers, and my community is awesome.
So you basically, you went from going, oh my God, I might have to do this call center job. I don't know what's going on. I'm getting paid, by the government just enough to live, because I have this passion thing and I have this crazy idea about a kung fu wizard, and and then maybe I can get some possible money in a couple of months, and maybe it's gonna be just enough to, oh my God, everything's working. There's a lot of interest. Everybody's engaged. Everybody wants to go. Okay, now I got to do this. Now I got to do this work. Okay, now, and you kind of just get thrown on a stage with the curtains pulled back and a bright light shined on you, and now you realize you got to start tap dancing, and you forgot your pants.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden I'm, just pulling 18-hour work days, and that first sort of month after that happened is more or less a blur at this point.
Is there anything you want to see in terms of the mediums? Like, do you ever want to see Who Fights Monsters in another medium? Is there anything like anime or VR or TV or movies? Or is there anything that you'd like to see He Who Fights Monsters evolve into another medium?
It could. I mean, it'd be super exciting to do that. Like there have been talks about things that I can't really talk about, but it'd certainly be exciting. But for me, like I've talked to authors who seem to be see actually writing their books as sort of a stepping stone to a television adaptation. But while I'd love that, I think it'd be amazing. I never was looking at this as anything but, I'd like to get my books out there, because even just getting to the point of releasing these as books was, part of a path. Because I was doing this full time when this was just me putting up stories on the internet, like with no books involved. So, just getting to that point is great.
It's so funny because what I'm hearing from you this whole time is like, you're super grateful because you know that like this is kind of an end goal, and you're living the end goal. You've made it by your definition of things. And so everything else is just gravy. You're just enjoying the ride, and it's super awesome. And whatever happened. Is there any dragons? Is there any things that like you have to battle that you don't know if you can overcome? Like just the inherent laziness that we feel to get up and write another chapter? Or like, is there like, what do you battle, or what do you feel like is your greatest challenge that you face nowadays?
I think for a lot of writers, possibly most writers, procrastination is the greatest dragon to slay. It's so easy to find reasons to not write, and that was like the big lesson that I had to learn before I could make any of this work. Because if you write when you feel like writing, then you're never going to get anything written. Like not on a level that you're actually producing the kind of output to make any kind of career. Like he asked earlier about.
I don't mean to interrupt, but just to dive into that. Like, so can you talk to me a little bit? How do you overcome that dragon of procrastination? Just so I can understand a little bit more. The curious and lazy minds want to know. Could you?
For me, the answer was scheduling. Like, you asked earlier about some of the things that help.
Yeah.
Advice I'd give. I'd say the first thing is, if you want to do this as a job, then you have to treat it like a job. And that means getting up and going to work. My work is very close to, but getting that output done is about scheduling. So, and this is where releasing like online in serialized form really, really helps. It's like a huge driver that gets me to get up and go to work. Like, because it's like, okay, so there is a chapter going out tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I need to have a chapter tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. It has to be written, it has to be revised, it has to be edited, it has to be rewritten, it has to be proofed. And sometimes that's rough. Like I have a certain chapter length, but if I do a really long chapter, that means that's more hours of work. If I have to rewrite that chapter 3 times, hypothetically, until I get it where I want it to go, then I'm going to bed late. But scheduling is great for a couple of reasons. One, it's incredible for community building. Like when you work in serialization and you're trying to build up an audience, consistency is king.
Yeah.
If people know that they're going to be able to come every weekday at a certain time and there will be a chapter waiting for them, then they will be waiting for it. And that is amazing for building an audience because, like I said, there's no gatekeepers on this space. So everyone who has gotten into stories in sort of the Royal Road serialization thing has come across a story that they loved that vanished. Like halfway through, bang, gone, no explanation. That sucks. That sucks super hard. So if you can convince people that your content will be there when you say it's going to be there every single day, 100% reliable, and you keep up the communication if you're doing things like taking a mental health week because you've been working 18-hour days for 2 months, then that will build up confidence and that will build up readership, but it'll also help keep you on track.
Yeah.
Because it'll keep them coming, but it'll, when okay, I have to have this. Because if you, a traditional author's like, okay, so I've got to have this book written in 4 months. I don't think 4 months is a very helpful deadline in terms of getting you off your butt, because it's like, hey, I've got 4 months. It's like, well, my next chapter comes out in 16 hours. that is the deadline that'll get you in front of your computer.
That's so true, man. Those flags that sound like that consistently. Like I put I've been doing this podcast, and I publish every Monday and every Friday every week for the last almost a year straight, and then a little bit after that. But that knowing that I'm going to be doing that, it like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. I don't know how I feel today. I'm going to have to like get ready and get going. Today is technically Thanksgiving, by the way, here in California, in the US. You're one of my favorite authors. So when you booked this date, I was just like, who the hell books on Thanksgiving? And I was like, and I looked, I was like, is there Thanksgiving in Australia? And like, no, they don't celebrate. And I was like, man, I was like, damn. And I was like, you know what though? I gotta get my publishing in. I want it. You're one of my favorite authors. So I was just like, I'm gonna do this with you because I really appreciate it. And it does keep to that scheduling, that consistency and that output. So
I'm sorry to jump in on your Turkey Day.
I'm like, come on, we had pilgrims, we came here, we celebrated, we had gratitude. We said, hey, this is a nice land. We should use some of it. We're only going to take a little bit. We're really grateful, though.
Yeah, that's how it went.
That's exactly.
Yeah, and Christopher Columbus was a great guy.
Right, yeah. Don't really read into the books. Just kind of look at the pictures. If you could just look at the pictures and not really read about the actual history, be great. But again, that consistent, that posting and that putting that stuff out there is a very valuable thing. But sometimes you don't want to. And I do get what you're talking about, that consistent posting. I just, from my perspective, for you to kick out like chapters of reading material, it's one thing for me to have just a bantery conversation, back and forth on interesting topics, but you actually, that's what I'm like, how do you not build yourself into a hole? You have like a late night drinking session and it's due. And is that like, how do you not wake up and like, oh, wow, okay, now we have griffins or whatever, as you kick out the content. So I find it to be very inspirational on the work that you do. Is there, I mean, as we start to come through to the end of here, I mean, is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you, how to support your work, and what does that actually look like?
No. See, this is the sort of traditional social media, call to actiony part of the process where, and I think everyone feels awkward about it going in, because this is not generally where I sort of build up my audience. Like there's some Facebooky stuff, there's some groups I poke my head in from time to time, but I wasn't even on Facebook until this year. It's like, publishers are like, okay, so Facebook, you have to be on Facebook now. It's like, oh no. Because I came up from that serialized space, and there's the LitRPG subreddit, and there's these Discord communities, and that's sort of where I sort of came from and where my thing started off. So I don't have a Twitter handle. I do have a Facebook that I checked at some point. No, but mostly Facebook. Because I'll just go through and I'll just accept all my friend requests, and then people will send me messages, and I'll have a chat with a reader, and that's pretty much what I use Facebook for.
Well, communities form around the content that gets released, and so if everything got released into a private Facebook group, that's where your community would be. But it sounds like Patreon and Discord is the places to find you and find all your hours and hours and hours of content.
Yeah, the Discord really, because I'm always on that. Like even if I'm just writing, I'm sort of just keeping an eye on that in the background, watching conversations around the story and the latest chapters. Fortunately, it doesn't take a lot of moderation. My community on Discord is actually really nice.
Oh, that's on.
Which is pleasant. So I engage with them a lot because there's lots of really sort of specific questions about the system. It's like, what do these three essences, make, and what does that mean? And so every now and again, when I have a spare hour or something, I'll sit down and I'll do like a really in-depth thing on some aspect of the world building that exists but never made it into the text because it wasn't relevant to the story. And then I'll just, drop that for the community to, do with what they will.
It's so cool that you actually engage with the community and all that, and be able to actually answer these burning questions, because they're burning questions, because they're like these ideas get into these readers' heads, me being one. It's like why, like, what is this about? What is the cooking about? What is this other thing about? How does, if you make the sin essence and you take it with the mighty, what happens?
Yeah.
Like, I want to know. This is, get out of my head, answer my questions. You know, that does happen, which is amazing that you actually take the time to do that, because it shows that you care. And when people know that you care, that the author cares not only about the book, but actually about the readers, then they feel more engaged. They feel like it's not gonna be a fly by night book series that's gonna disappear, and you know, it's gonna be, you know, the rug's gonna get pulled out from under them. So I think it's really important what you do. If people want to find your Discord, if people want to find your Patreon, how do they do that?
The best place to go is because the Patreon is just like the latest handful of chapters. It's more or less, you know, about a month worth of advanced chapters, whereas there's hundreds and hundreds of stuff on, say, Royal Road.
Mm-hmm.
And there are links right there on Royal Road. Like the front page of the story has a Discord link that'll take you straight there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a Patreon button at like the bottom of every chapter. So, you know, it's like, I want to give you money. There's a great big yellow button for giving you money. So,
well, now that I know that that's an option, I now know what my next leap I'm going to be making. The audiobook series is great on Audible. I recommend it highly. It's a great narrator author combo. Go in there. If not, Royal Road. He Who Fights with Monsters. You can go to Royal Road, check that out. Once you get done consuming all of that, reading it, or using the Speechify app, as I use, to go through and reach it, because I can't read words, or choose not to. That's a great one. But then when you hit that and you want more content, you can go on to Patreon, upgrade to that, pay Travis a couple of bucks so they can continue to dedicate those 18-hour days.
It's not always that bad.
Yeah, it's wonderful content, man.
I'm taking December off for a reason.
Congratulations, brother. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the work that the world building that you've done. And, you know, let me know. You said the 28th is going to be when the book releases for book 4. So what I'll do is I'll schedule it, this series, this actual podcast, to get released right around that time frame.
Awesome.
So when it goes out on there, just to kind of seed it at the same time. Do you, and I don't know this, do you have a title for that book yet? Is it out, or?
No, it's just He Who Fights with Monsters, book 4.
Okay.
Because, you know, as you can tell from that, I tend to make quite lengthy titles. So if it was like He Who Fights with Monsters, you know, book 4, and then the actual book title is that big, I'm going to end up with, my cover art is just going to be one little person in the corner just fighting against the wall of text.
He Who Fights with Words. Get back. I'm cool, man. Well, Travis, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for continuing up on the work, and I will see you on the other side.
Thanks, man. It was good talking with you again.
Absolutely, brother. You too. Take care now. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening.